There we go. So, oddly enough, I don't really have a particular topic in mind, but it occurs to me that I haven't talked about my thoughts on the terminal list. So, I'll talk about that. Um, Good. Period. Flat out. Simple as good. And really, that's all I do as far as a review goes. I give it a recommendation or I recommend to avoid it. I do not recommend to avoid this show. I highly recommend it. Um, Chris Pratt definitely has a future as an action star, which is awesome. I love seeing comedians who go outside of their um, general casting or their type casting and go beyond what they've done before. Um, with other comedians in the past, we've seen really good stuff. Eddie Murphy in 48 Hours, yeah, he was still being funny, still being Eddie Murphy, but he played a very different personality than he portrayed on stage. Um, Robin Williams, I mean, everyone knows Robin Williams was able to play some of the most heartfelt, emotionally uh, endearing, and just involving characters. Plus, now I've never seen Insomnia, which apparently I'm told is an absolute crime for someone who's a bit of a film geek. So, yeah. But from what I understand, he did an incredible job in that as well. One of my favorite Robin Williams roles is a tiny, forgettable movie that I would never have watched if I was not familiar with Isaac Asimov's short stories, and that's The Bicentennial Man. Uh, Not a great movie, but it's got Robin Williams in it giving his all, and it is a good film for his performance. So I would recommend that one as well. But to bring it back to the terminal list, um, in some ways, it's got the 80s revenge movie aesthetic, and I'm having to speak a little louder than I want to. Just 1 second while I bring that camera a little bit closer. Oh, where are you? There we are. No, that's down here. Yeah, come here. There we go. I know I'm pretty. But eh, framing's not bad. Anyway, with Chris Pratt's, or sorry, I started talking about the 80s aesthetic. Um, the revenge theme, or um, retribution, probably a better, excuse me, probably a better choice for this, or a better descriptor for the show. English, it's not an easy language even for those who were born speaking it, or, well, raised speaking it. Um, the uh, the retribution. Excuse me, just a second. Sorry about that. So the retribution theme in this show is definitely geared to a male audience, um, but I think women would enjoy it as well, because it shows a man being a man in really the uh, dark side of the protector role, and but it also does show a loving father, which is mostly shown in flashbacks, unfortunately. Um, the first few episodes kind of have a psychological thriller aspect to them. And I apologize for spoilers. I will try to avoid spoiling as much as I can. And really, this kind of element is mentioned in the synopsis of the show anyway. So there's the psychological thriller aspect comes from you're wondering how much reality is actually being shown on screen and how much of it is delusion, um, which they do call back to at the very end of the show, which is absolutely brilliantly used. Uh, and in some ways, you could almost make the case, if you were of the mind to, that it's not necessarily delusion so much as a sort of a spiritual experience. I don't want to be um, too too direct about this, but I'm trying not to be too coy either. Um, I have to choose my words a little carefully here, but I'll avoid that scene anyway. But it does end on a great note. Um, the very end is kind of given away a little earlier in the episode, in the last episode. But by that point, you should be. I think if I went back and watched from the beginning again, I would see it coming much sooner. Um, but it is very well done. Taylor Kitsch plays a character in this who is very close to Chris Pratt's character, and he does a phenomenal job. He's been one of my favorite actors for a very long time. He's ended up in some really bad movies, um, but I think after watching the Terminal List, I think a lot of people will agree with me that Taylor Kitsch really deserves a bigger shot in Hollywood. Um, let's see. Uh, the gunplay and the weapons that are used, uh, in at least one case, used to disturbing effect. Uh, I believe that's episode 4, and yeah, this is episode 4 is a pretty. There's a pretty gory, pretty visceral scene. And for those of you who have seen the show already, I use the word visceral intentionally. Um, but the first half of the show is kind of an action psychological thriller mix up or mashup rather, because there's a little question of how much of what's actually going on is actually happening because of what's set up in the first episode. And I absolutely love that. But once you get to the fourth episode, um, it's kind of obvious that what's going on. It's kind of dropped that psychological thriller aspect a little bit and kind of moved more towards action, uh, which doesn't really, in my opinion, harm the show. If you're much more of a psychological thriller fan than you are an action fan, then yeah, you may find it's not quite to your taste. Uh, but I kind of doubt it. And really, the writing, the dialogue, um, I didn't see anything particularly terrible for uh, like unused Chekhov's guns or anything like that. Um, yeah, I mean this is there's some really good stuff in the show. And again, I do apologize, but I'm trying not to be spoilering. Um, I really recommend it. I recommend it at least as highly as I did Reacher. Reacher was really good as well. There is. I'm racking my brain now to think, but I don't recall any particularly woke moments in this show. No, I can't remember any particularly woke things that stood out anyway, or that remain standing in my brain. Um, but as far as the general themes go, I mean, it's very much a male power fantasy, which isn't a bad thing. Um, Regardless of what some people may think. Uh, the the presence that Chris Pratt has on screen when he's in character is amazing. Um, he's definitely showing serious talent as an actual actor. Um, and Kitsch the same. Uh, Almost everybody in this movie or show rather, is really good. One of the things that causes me to kind of switch back and forth between the term movie and show is because of the streaming nature of this. It's really more like a serialized movie that you're watching rather than a show, like a traditional episodic show. And that tends to be the case with a lot of streaming stuff. Um, and I do apologize for the dead air because I'm kind of trying to get my thoughts in order and express them in a cogent manner. Um, but I mean, it's very much a guy's show. Um, the theme of uh, retribution, not to keep using the same word, but it definitely does fit. But the overarching storyline of a man who's been wronged and is redressing those wrongs. Uh, it's very much something that comes out of the 80s movie aesthetic. And one of the executive producers is Antoine Fuqua, who did, if I recall correctly, and I apologize if I don't, The Replacement Killers. And like he did a bunch of action movies in the 90s as well. And you can really see his influence a fair bit on this show, and it's good. It definitely suits the aesthetic of the show. Um, but not being a military person myself, not having a great deep interest in military things, it still strikes me as uh, very the details of the military stuff strike me as very very actually, there is one woke thing, sort of, and I'll come to that in a moment. But the detail on the military stuff strikes me as being highly authentic. I seem to recall having seen some praise of it in other places on other people's channels. But and I'll come to the woke thing now. The only woke thing that's in there is that there's a female character who I won't say that she was put in simply for the sake of the woke agenda, because I don't think she was. And she's definitely a well written female character, though she does have a little more of the male behavior than one might expect. But at the same time, I don't recall that she's ever directly used in any of the action sequences. I don't think she gets directly involved in any of the action, if I can recall. I don't believe so. And uh, it's not that she's used as a subordinate character or that she's somehow dismissed for her femininity or being female. She is a very admirable character and definitely well written. She's not Princess Leia, but by the same token, she's also not Captain Marvel. So, right, she's not treated as some sort of super savior. Uh, but at the same time, she's also not dismissed by any means within the writing. Um, all in all, and I've just hit 15 minutes, so I will wrap this up fairly shortly. But all in all, I absolutely recommend this show. It's one of the best things I've seen in a long time, and I don't think you'd go wrong by watching it. I believe that's probably it. Yeah, so I hope you have a good day. I hope you continue to have good days, and rise again until lambs become lions. Bye-bye.